So, welcome back to the Science and Art of Open Water Swimming. Before we get started today, I'd like to acknowledge just how special our guest is. Vicki Delves has been involved in triathlon in Western Australia for over 3 decades as an athlete, coach, educator, and leader. She's a life member of Triathlon WA, a Triathlon Australia performance coach, and a founding member of City Triathlon Club. But more than titles, Vicki's real impact has been at the entry point of the sport. Since the late 1990s, she's introduced thousands of people to triathlon through programs like the Women's Academy of Triathlon and TriStars, creating safe, inclusive environments where beginners, many of them quite nervous swimmers, could build confidence in open water and discover what they were capable of. With Busso 100 approaching and many athletes lining up for their first ever open water triathlon swim, I can't think of a better person to talk to about fear, confidence, environment, and how we help people feel safe enough to learn in the water. Vicki, thanks so much for joining me.
Thank you, Grant. Thanks for the opportunity to come and talk about triathlon and just overcoming fears and gaining confidence. It's really important that everyone has an opportunity to feel that they're important and can be supported on whatever journey they've got.
To start with, can you take us back to your early days in triathlon? How did you first come to open water swimming and the sport of triathlon?
My background is as a health and phys ed teacher, so teaching a whole range of sporting subjects. I've always loved sport, no matter what the sport is, and I've been a golfer, I've been a hockey player, and love everything about just being physically active. So in the early 90s, the school that I was teaching at, we had a year 11 and 12 course going, and myself and another teacher decided to do triathlons as the sport. It wasn't a sport in the education space at that stage. So the colleague was very much into triathlons, and we both started training together. Herself, much better athlete than myself, Robin Scott, who is one of the pillars of WA triathlon scene. So through that love of just training, and for me, I love training. I love it. Just the camaraderie, the getting out there was just, it's the best. You can't beat that feeling. So we decided to introduce it to our year 11 and 12 classes. And that was a huge thing, not just for those kids, but for ourselves and growing the sport. And over the years, like in the next 5 years, many schools joined that space. So for me to do that, I hadn't done a lot of open water swimming, to be honest, at that stage. I'd done a lot of pool swimming and a lot of cycling, but not a lot of open water swimming. So it is really, really different. So I started doing those events, and that for me, I always like to, whether it's teaching or coaching or whatever, I like to do the thing that I'm talking about. And I find that that's a better way, A, to connect, but for people to really believe that you understand everything that they might be going through.
What did open water feel like to you in those early days when you first started moving from pool to ocean or open water swimming?
Initially, I remember thinking, yikes, if the conditions weren't that conducive to smooth swimming, it wasn't easy. And for me, those early ones, I remember I did a few river swims actually. That was my transition from, I did pool, and we had events in the city called the City Shaker that Gary Itstein was one of the organisers for. And then Matilda Bay, and I did the first Matilda Bay women's event. A lot to do the triathlon, but also to support women. It was the Women's Sport Foundation introduced that race back in the day, and I remember the person who was the president of the Women's Sport Foundation, Yvonne Raitt. She came along and did that race on a bike that can only be described as one that you would ride from Roto from your room down to get your morning loaf. It had the basket on the top. But she didn't care because it was actually all just about the participation. So that was, for me, the early days were around the Matilda Bay swims and the city swims. And also in that time, a lot of the clubs were doing their own events. So we used to do Friday night events at Burswood down on the river, and then we would have barbecues after. So that was okay. That water was okay. But when we did them at North Coast on a Friday night and Scarborough on a Friday night, everyone who knows anything about the ocean will know that it's substantially more difficult at that time of night. And I remember a few of those honestly thinking someone's got to drag me out of here. It was pretty tough going. But what got me through, and I really based a lot of my coaching on it, was the support that was around there. They had people in the water, they had a lot of people guiding you before you went in. So for me, that's never been lost on me, that we've got to continue to do that.
When you work with these beginners or first time triathletes, what are the most common challenges you see in the swim?
I think that the number one challenge is self doubt. To be honest, with especially with a lot of, and I've coached men and I've coached women and I've coached kids a lot in each area, but predominantly in the latter years, a really big contingent of women. I used to have 170 women come in at a time. So self doubt would be the main one. In all my years of teaching phys ed, you've always got the core of students who are physically active and confident and could adapt to any sport. But by and large, you've got many people, and the research shows that many people drop out during their teenage years for a range of reasons. And for a lot of people, they weren't that confident and competent in those skills. So to overcome that, a lot of people don't have the confidence. They certainly have a lot of self doubt and just the fear of what if I can't do it or what will people think of me. And I really have always encouraged that you're just there for yourself and you have just as much right as an elite person and should have that opportunity to do you and be you. So, and you know, I always say as a joke to them, like, no one's looking at you. Like, you know, triathletes, they're not going to be looking at you. They're worried about other things. So don't worry about it.
So, when they're heading into that water for the first time, other than that confidence, what else tends to worry them?
I'd say the breathing. The breathing is, if we're just breaking down onto the physical side and the technique side, just being able to breathe efficiently without panicking is the thing that I really work on. My coaching style would be not just to throw them into that open water. I do it as a scaffold. So I'd do it in the pool and then I'd do a pack simulating what it might be like. Then I might move to, which I did for many sessions. I'd move to Matilda Bay and used to run this swim called Swim Without the Black Line. And I'd have two of the people who coached with me on paddles and they're paddling next to the girls. And generally, I'd say 19 times out of 20, Matilda Bay was nice and flat and calm. So it was a good experience for them just to transition into that. And I'd have four coaches, myself included, in the water with the girls. And I would always identify, I'd either identify or they would say, can you swim next to me? So that transition provided a lot of confidence. So I'd have different distances for them in those river swims. And then the next transition, and I ran a lot of courses, open water courses down at Coogee. So for some of them, swimming in the open water and the fear of what's out there is real. So going down to Coogee into the nets was a good transition and doing lots and lots of repeats of elements that may be difficult for them in either the physical side or the mental side was a really a good strategy, I feel, for many. And I had a few girls over the time who went from those courses in Coogee and then went straight to Busso Jetty Swim. So um, I think just building those blocks of whatever it is for each person to be able to get to the next level is the way. That's my coaching style.
I think you're bringing in a lot of your phys ed teaching background as well, and really scaffolding the way that you deliver. the content. Just with the two environments, you've moved from the pool to the river and then to the ocean. The river can be quite dark and we can't see the bottom as easily as the ocean. So, did you find different challenges with those two environments with different people?
Yeah, definitely. So some the river being dark and not being able to see the bottom was the thing that scared them. And then when they went to the ocean, not always is it beautiful, but for some of them, they told me every single fish that they might have spotted on their way around the Busso jetty. And I said to them, a few of them, well, did you concentrate on any of your swimming, or was it just like a tour when you're on holidays? So for some, the darkness is the fear. For some, the lightness is the fear. So, but definitely the murky water for many of them of not knowing where they're going. And so then for me, that would bring in a really important element of sighting. So to overcome that, to eliminate that or reduce that as a risk, I'd really work on sighting. So whether it was sighting the land and trying to keep the same distance of the land if we were swimming horizontal, parallel, sorry, to the shore, or, looking up for the buoy or the marker down at wherever we were swimming. So trying just to work out what it is for each person and then trying to have a strategy or a drill really just to reduce that, to get them to the point of thinking, oh yeah, that's okay, yeah, I can do that. But definitely, like out in the ocean, that has got a lot of challenges. The first time we went out of the nets, definitely had people who found that thought of going out of there really challenging.
So, when you're introducing people to this open water, what sort of environment are you deliberately trying to create?
Initially, I'm trying just to create something that's very pool-like or river-like. That's my first session. I deliberately try work out where I'm going to go or how that set is going to be. And so when I do an open water plan for them, or we might do a course over 4 weeks, and that's typically what I do, a 4-week course in open water. I would sometimes change the sets when I'd get down there and I'd see the conditions. I'd change the set because the purpose of the set was to really get them ready for the next bit. And then I'd look and I'd think, okay, I'm not doing that at this moment, and change it. So just trying to transition them into a state where they can cope with each element, each variable that may change. I do a lot of work on just that, getting your breathing and relaxing and getting into a rhythm. So whether that's starting at the side, away from everyone, just so you've got your own little free space and you're into it, or for others where you're tucked in, if the fear for them is what's out there, for them, they might be, okay, well, get in the middle, get in the middle. But mainly it's around getting your rhythm, getting your breathing, and just trying to groundhog day each stroke. That's really what I'm saying to them. It's just groundhog day, groundhog day.
So, you speak about creating that safe environment for each person based on their own fears. How does creating or including humor and fun play into this development?
Yeah, huge amount. And so if you asked any of the people I'd coached, they would describe me as a very hard coach and pushing them to the limit. But and that is true. That is true. I want each person to be the best they can be with whatever their goal is. And not everyone wants their goal as getting on the podium. Some, and most, I'd say most, it's the participation or just that. But I have always tried to make it fun and really make people don't take yourself so seriously, because the harshest judge is quite often yourself, and that can be the thing that limits your next development. So for a lot of women, they are very self-conscious and really doubt themselves. So I do try and make it really fun and not to get so wrapped up in other things. And for me, that's I think has worked. I've had people and still got people that I've now coached for over 30 years, and they're still in my swim squad. Like last Thursday, one of them, I said, "Oh, you've been swimming with me for over 30 years." And she joked back to me, "Yes, but I'm still in the bottom lane." So, um, it's not always about the swimming. We all know that. It's not always about the sport. It's about a lot of things.
So you've worked with TriStars, so these are generally kids 7 to 12-year-olds. How do you approach that differently, or do you approach that differently when you are working with them versus adults?
Yeah, I do, because uh, a program for kids is just not less sets than an adult would get. And so, I've had a lot in that TriStar range, but I also ran this mini TriStars that I'd just adapt for a lot of the siblings that would come along. So I'd have this little 4 to 7 group. So I had 50 TriStars come along, and we can't expect little kids to do the sets of an adult. They're not ready for it, and we don't want the injuries. So it's really important that they have a lot of fun, and we want to keep them engaged. We want to keep them engaged, and we want to keep them in the sport. That's the goal. But if they're not in the sport, we certainly want to keep them physically active for life. That's my thing. So historically, in all the sports I've coached, quite often the best coach is with the best athletes. I didn't adopt that model for the TriStars. I had my strongest coaches with the kids who really needed it the most in developing. So that if there were challenges, the really, really refined coaches, I had them down there. I always took the hardest group myself. I feel that that's how we can really develop the sport.
Do kids approach open water differently to adults?
Yes, well, there's two distinct camps. There's the camp in the kids where they they have no fear, and they will go in and they'll do things that they actually are not really prepared for or ready for or have the skills for. So there's that camp, no fear. Away they go. And we're busily trying to rein them in to make sure nothing happens, because that's my main job, is to make sure nothing goes wrong. And whether I'm coaching kids or adults or anyone, that's my main fear for myself, is the safety of the people that I'm looking after, whether something goes wrong on the bike or the run or the water. I don't want anyone to get injured or hurt ever, ever. So that camp of the kids who just away they go, and they'd run across the road, or like in cycling, for example, that don't know how to keep left. So away they go, and they're charging into oncoming bikes. So one of the strategies we used for that, we used to put scrunchies on their left hand, and we'd say, "Ride to the scrunchie, ride to the scrunchie." And yeah, so we've got that camp in swimming where they just in they go and away they go. And then we've got the others who are so nervous and scared, and for them even to enter the water, there's often lots of tears and just refusal. So yeah, two distinct camps. But that's true actually in adults as well. Sometimes I've had men and women who are trying things that they just shouldn't be yet.
Do you think there's anything that the adults could learn from kids?
Yes, yeah. I mean, I love the TriStars. That is some of my just best memory. I loved it. Loved every single thing about it. In that, just the joy, the sheer joy of seeing in someone's eyes the happiness, and when they don't know sometimes things down the track that you might know when you're 20 or 30 or whatever, just seeing that in their face is so beautiful. But also seeing their parents, the happiness it's bringing their parents is really great. It's fantastic. I always say to everyone, coaches get the best reward. The kids and the parents, they might get that medal around their neck and sleep with it in their bed for 2 weeks. And I've had that where kids haven't taken the medal off for 2 weeks, and the parents will send me an email saying, "I'm really struggling to get that medal off their neck for participation." But it's, as a coach, you're just so lucky to be with people who you can see that you're making a difference in their life, and if it's making just them, for adults, it might be the thing that got them through the day. For kids, just that sheer joy that's just unbridled, and it's really funny and beautiful to see. Yeah, it's an amazing experience.
So, just reflecting a little bit, looking back over your coaching career, is there anything you'd do differently now to when you started?
Yeah, I think all of us would do some things differently. Many things differently. I think over the years, I've looked back, and when I've realized something for a person, and sometimes I'm hard on myself thinking, I wish I had have realized that earlier. And you can't know everything or pick up on everything, but the mental health side is just so huge, and the importance of being there and supporting people is has emerged that it's open now, but in the early days it wasn't. And so I look back and think at different points through the decades I've coached, I wish I had have realised that quicker, whether it was having supports in there or how I do a session. Yeah, as a coach, I think I've been hard on myself in that regard and thinking, I should have been better to have realised that.
Just on that, do you think the opportunity to swim and to be involved in sport like triathlon is a way that athletes, people try to overcome some of their mental health challenges?
Yes, it is. Yeah, I've got so many examples. I wouldn't share their names, but for them, whether it's just I'm going to enter that course and I'm going to do that race for me to show me I can. Yeah. And me, not me as the coach, me as themselves. Yes. Or whether, they've never swum. I've had people who have never swum and still, you know, I coach a couple of people who have just got to be able to swim 25 meters. So I have a squad, but I also do one-on-ones where I'll hop in the water with them. And so a 50-year-old woman or a 60-year-old man, whether it's cultural or just they never did, or they might have had something that happened to them, which one recently did as a young child. They had a swimming episode where they were caught under the water. So then they never swam their whole life. And then they've come to me and teaching them to swimming, and they're going to do an event. So you can imagine that through all their years, they've had this traumatic episode, and then they've never swum, and now they're trying to address that trauma that they've had. Is it's more about it's their whole life has been impacted by that, and there are many examples of that for many people, whether it's that or whether it's a relationship change or whether it's a work change or just whether they feel, okay, I'm going to try grow in this area. So yeah, it's more than the event.
And around confidence in the water, has your thinking changed about how you might address the fears over time?
um in a way, I mean, as a phys ed teacher, that is something that's always important, that not everyone in your class is going to be that athletic kind. So I've always had that mindset that you have to find ways for maybe the non-athletic or the people who can't get those skills easily. They don't come to them easily. So I've always had that mindset. But over the years, I have probably bolstered the supports for people. So I'm really, really careful in that open water situation around who's swimming next to who. And so, like in those early sessions, I'm sort of working out who is swimming next to who and where I'll have the person on the board and where I'll have the coaches. So I'm really working that out to make sure that it is a good experience for that person, but it actually is still pushing them slightly out of whatever comfort zone that each person's got. It's important to try make sure that the whole group is not doing an easy drill for them, and it might be easy for that top lot, and I've got to work out how I'm going to change that and differentiate, and that's probably one of my skill sets is I can differentiate a set. So I've got one set and I might have 11 versions going on during that time. So I think that's a skill as a coach or a teacher or an educator, that you to be able to do that, and also to be able to read the play. I'm looking and I can see, and I quickly adapt if I think, oh no, that's not going how I want it to, or I can see the person starting to get stressed or not achieve or get frustrated. And that does happen. People get really frustrated that they're not getting faster or they're not getting better. So just trying to put strategies in place for whatever the barriers, and that's what they are, they're just barriers, to get them to the next level.
And through your coaching journey, has there been any professional development, educational type opportunities you've taken? It may not be specific to swimming or triathlon that you found have been really helpful for you to grow as a coach.
Yeah, I think that's so important to keep doing courses, keep growing. So I certainly do all the triathlon courses, and actually just did the ones for each year you do your reaccreditation ones. But the ones that I seek out outside of that triathlon space, I do a lot of courses, and also I work in education around relationships and around really working with people, negotiating. All of those things are really important. So I do a lot of those type of courses, but I also do courses on really the trends coming through. And I try to really, and the trends coming through in the sport, but really the trends for engagement. And I was just at a cricket function a couple of weeks ago, and a young person won an award. Their club had lost a lot of members, and their membership was really, really low. And this young person, who was a teenager, came on the committee and started doing TikToks and different engagement strategy. And their club has now, their membership's gone through the roof. So it's not just about the TikTok, it's just about thinking differently. So young people think differently now, and to keep young people engaged in the sport or to attract and retain, we have to do things differently. So that's something that I've loved about Triathlon WA. You look at this year's May event, there's lots of events to appeal to lots of people, and that's just magnificent. Yeah. In the early days, we'd all hop over to Roto, which was a great event, and loved it and did that. But it really was catering for people who were either elite or the age category, who had a pretty high level of skill. Now we're catering for everybody, and that's what we need to do.
It's one thing to write sets and look at the athlete and try and build skills, but then it's creating that relationship with the athlete as a person, not just the athlete.
Yeah, I agree. One of my greatest joys is I've coached a grandma, her daughter, and the daughter's daughters at the same time. So 3 generations. It's just such an incredible experience to have that people trust you to bring their kids and their kids to you to coach. So relationships, and just, I've been to, over the years of the athletes that I've coached, so many weddings, engagements, been to see them when they've had the babies, been to see them if they've had illness, been to, funerals of their parents or whatever. Relationships is everything, really. And the coaches who connect with the athletes around their whole life, it's so important, because that person then feels that you care about them and you value them. And like, I would know all of my athletes, if they've got children, I think it's important I know their names, and I always ask about their school and their dog's name, their this, because that's interesting to me, and I care about that, and also that helps me understand them when I'm coaching, if something is out of kilt for them in whatever.
So just coming towards the end now, I've got a couple of quicker, easier ones. What's your favourite swim set and why?
Leading up to this podcast, I mentioned to the swim squad on Thursday that I was going to do this, and they were all laughing, wanting the link to be able to listen. And I said, "Oh, no, should I tell them the swim squad that I really like, or the the swim set, the swim set that maybe because I am a big butterfly lover." So that they were hilariously laughing that I wouldn't mention butterfly, but I do love butterfly in a set or butterfly build up. My favourite sets are where I'll mix it up and I'll do a range of strokes. I always use kickboard and pull boy in every session at some stage, and I do love bands around the feet. So which I've just been away for a few weeks in the eastern states and came back, and I was looking in the cage and they had hidden the bands so that I couldn't find them. So, but they didn't know that I have a spare set in a different part of the cage. So my favourite set, I really like medleys, and the reason I like medleys is doing different strokes is really good for the whole of the body. So whether they're doing backstroke and it's nice and easy, just moving the body in different ways is really good just for loosening up and keeping it going. But at other points in the time, I do love a good old high heart rate set just to I love it when they come in and touch the wall and I can see them just puffing and panting and yeah, that's great to see.
When you're swimming, are you a singer or a counter?
Well, my swimming is getting quite slow, but I swim by myself. I swim 5 times a week, and I'm not a fast swimmer, but I love swimming. I use air shocks and have music playing nowadays. But when I end of last year did the 12-hour Perkins swim with a lot of the people I train with, which was fantastic and fantastic fundraiser, and we enjoyed it. But I had to go through 12 hours of torment of them telling me how bad my technique was. But that was okay. But if I'm training for something and wanting to get a bit of speed up, I count strokes. Yeah, I count strokes.
If you could give one piece of advice to someone doing their first open water triathlon swim, what would it be?
My piece of advice would be when when you're in that swim, you'll have moments where you're finding it hard to concentrate on one aspect of technique during that little wave of hardness. So whether it's the glide or whether it's making sure that you've got the long stroke past your thigh at the end of the stroke, just pick one thing and just each stroke concentrate on that. And before you know it, 5 minutes is gone, or you're starting to feel better, or whether it's the breathing, whether you're just going to, for that little segment, concentrate. Okay, I'm just going to think about the breathing of just not holding on to my breath the whole time. And by and large, whether that's from pylon to pylon, if you're down there and all of a sudden you've gone through past 3 pylons, it will make you feel better and you'll feel more in control rather than thinking of the whole. Sometimes if you're just thinking about, I've got to get down to the end of the jetty and back again, or whatever you're doing, it's too much. So just break it down.
And is there anything else that we haven't covered today that you'd like to share?
Well, I think the thing that I really wanted to say the most is that everyone, whatever you're doing, it's a great thing. So the moment you make that decision to do it, and that's the hardest thing, making the decision to do it and starting the first day, that first training or signing up, that's the hardest thing. From then on, it's easier. So everyone's got their own vision of and their reason. Everyone's got their own reason, and they're all good reasons. There's no not good reason, and for that, you should just be so proud of yourself for doing that, because that's the hardest bit, is making that decision to do something. So be proud and don't be hard on yourself. And whatever your challenge is, that is magnificent and so good. People don't realise just the power of what they're doing can change someone else's life. And I'll just quickly give this example of this happened 20 years ago. Someone came up to me recently and said, I was at this event and I saw this person and I was there as a spectator, and it made such a difference to me that I changed my life and I went off and went down this different road. So people don't know the power of what they are giving to other people. And I think if I was talking specifically about women, but I know it applies to men, I used to run a lot of mother and children events at Perth College and Wesley. And I'd break it down. It'd be a swim, run, and you'd do it with your kids. So you'd work out what distance you did, and then your child would jump in and do the other bit. It was the best bonding exercise of all time. And quite often we don't think about the reverse role model. So those kids being so proud of their parent, we don't often talk about that or think about that. We think of it as the parents being proud of the kids, and they are. Yeah, everyone's a role model, and everyone has got the power to have an influence, a positive influence on someone else. So that's what I'd say to people doing this event. That there might be bits that are scary or challenging, and there might be bits that aren't, but it is just incredible you're doing it, and it's fantastic. And there'll be people watching you, not judging you, but watching you and thinking, oh, that is so great. So great that you're doing it.
Well, it's a wonderful place to finish. Before we go, though, if people wanted to be coached by you, engaged with your programs, how can they get in contact?
My program is Women's Academy of Triathlon, and my swim squad I've got out of Aqualife over in Vic Park. But to contact me, you can just put that in a browser, Women's Academy of Triathlon. I'm on Facebook, Women's Academy of Triathlon, and send me a message, and then I'll get back to you. I do one-on-one coaching, and I've done many road courses, but I do mountain bike courses. I love mountain biking now, just for being off the roads. And also, I'm not that flash at that, but I love it. And I did Cape to Cape and probably came second last or last, but it wasn't about that. It's just about doing something for yourself or with others that makes you feel good. That's it.
Wonderful. Vicki, thank you very much for taking the time to talk to me today. With Bustleton 100 and the associated events only a few weeks away, I think sharing this information is going to be fantastic for our listeners.
Thanks, Graham. Thanks for your time.
Before we finish up, I just want to highlight something Vicki said that really stayed with me. She talked about how the hardest part isn't the swim itself, it's making the decision to start, signing up, turning up, stepping into the water for the first time. And once you've done that, everything else becomes manageable, one stroke at a time. If you'd like to learn more about Vicki's work, her coaching, or the Women's Academy of Triathlon, I've included links in the show notes. You can also find her on Facebook, and I'd strongly encourage you to check out what she's built over decades in the sport. If you've enjoyed this episode, please consider sharing it with someone who might be feeling nervous about open water swimming. And you can follow the podcast on Facebook and Instagram for new episodes and updates. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you in the water.